Green Burial Alliance, and we're excited to welcome our third episode of Ask the Expert. I'm here today with Peter Quakenbush of West Michigan Burial Forest, an up-and-coming conservation burial ground located in Brooks Township, Michigan. In this special interview, we will be talking to Peter about his and his wife Annica's recent legal victory recently passed an ordinance banning the creation of new cemeteries, an apparent reaction to the opening of their cemetery. Throughout the interview, we'll encourage you to leave any questions that you may have in the live chat box. That way we can answer them during our Q&A session. So without further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Peter, we are happy to have you here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about West Michigan Burial Forest and give the audience a little bit of background on what led up to today concerning the opening of your cemetery. Hi, Peter.
Hi. Thanks for having me. So for the past number of years, we've been working to establish, hopefully, Michigan's first conservation burial ground. And so in early 2021, we purchased a property that seemed like it would be suitable. So the property itself was perfect. The location was good. All the qualities of the land were good. And according to the ordinances as they were written, it seemed like it would be possible. So cemeteries were mentioned once in the township ordinances, and they were in the definition of institutions, and institutions were allowed with a special use permit in our low residential area. So that all seemed like it was good. We talked to the township initially, and nobody said no. And it was like, oh yeah, that's interesting. And like, this is America. You should be able to make money on your own property, that type of thing. So we're like, okay, cool. Let's go ahead with this. And then last summer, kind of out of nowhere, we were notified that a police power ordinance had been passed that banned cemeteries. And so there's kind of two types of ordinances that that townships can do. One is police power, and that is normally to regulate activities, not land uses, but it's one that can be passed without any public input. So normally when ordinances are passed, like zoning ordinances, that requires a meeting and notifying all the people, and there's kind of some back and forth, and there's all this due process. That's not necessary for the police power ordinance. But zoning ordinances are normally the ones that dictate land uses. So that would be the more appropriate one. So anyways, this was passed, and they sent a letter to us notifying us that it was not legal to do what we were wanting to do. And we reached out to this organization called the Institute for Justice, IJ, and they were happy to take our case. They're a nonprofit national organization. They have a bunch of attorneys, and they specialize in kind of fighting the government and sticking up for the little guy. And they like cases like this that have to do with property rights and all of that sort of thing. So beginning of this year, a couple things happened. We filed a case against the township, but the township also passed some new zoning ordinances. So they kind of solidified their stance and put it into their new ordinances, and they updated the definition of cemeteries to include everything really. So it's extremely broad. And then they updated their definition of institutions to exclude cemeteries. And then they expressly also excluded banned cemeteries, just kind of outright. And so the case was filed, and in July, we were supposed to have our initial hearing. And so kind of what the township was hoping was that our case would be dismissed. What we were sort of hoping for was that it would go into this discovery phase, so it could go to trial, essentially. But neither of those things happened. On the day of, so we had some attorneys, they flew in for the event, and on the very morning of, the judge recused himself, which was a new word for me at the time. And so basically decided that he was unfit to hear that trial or that case because of some connection to the case. So then we had been waiting quite a long time for that hearing, but then all of a sudden we were without a judge and we were without a hearing date. So that was rather disappointing because we're like, okay, this is going to take forever. But it only took a month to get a new judge and a new hearing. And so last month in August, we had that hearing. And again, we were the township was hoping for it to be dismissed, and we were hoping to go into this discovery phase. But the judge went above and beyond and actually made a ruling. And the ruling was that what the township was trying to do is unconstitutional. You can't just ban cemeteries. So that was really exciting for us. And that's kind of the win that has been mentioned. But it gets a little bit more complicated because they're currently trying to, I guess, verify that ruling. So it kind of needs to be officially filed. And so our people and the opposing council can't quite agree on what was said or how to word that. So we have filed something that will probably, an objection might be filed against that. And the township has said things along the lines of basically they're planning to appeal. So then I guess it would go to another court. So that's where we are. It was a good and exciting win, but we're definitely still in the middle of things.
Well, I mean, Peter, kudos to you guys. Congratulations on that, on that win. And that is a big win, even though we know that certainly the fight is not over.
Yeah.
It's made a broad statement, and I think one that people will recognize and hopefully heed in the future, because there are too many people out there, just like yourself, who have suffered the same type of reaction or opposition for really no good reason. So I have no doubts in my mind that you will be victorious. It may take a while, but I'm sure everyone, our viewers and everyone listening today, would-be cemeterians, people who are cemeterians and just advocates are thrilled to death to know that, someone has stood up to the bureaucracy and won rightfully so. I mean, to get into kind of, what your mission is and what you've created. I mean, what initially inspired you and your wife to want to create this conservation burial forest?
Yeah, I have a background in biology. I'm currently a biology professor at Grand Valley State University, and I've always had a strong connection with nature. And so quite a few years ago, I was reading some books and they kind of turned me on to the idea of green burial. And that seemed a little out of reach for me because I didn't know of any close by areas that would have that option. And then I was reading another book and it turned me on to the idea of you could have a forest and people could be buried in the forest and that could be the cemetery. And that was really this beautiful idea of kind of acknowledging the value a standing forest can have. And it was this alternative method of land conservation. And all of that just kind of got, was beautifully packaged for me. And I was like, well, with my interests in land conservation, in plants especially, I think I would be really well positioned to essentially take care of a forest and bring this option to Michigan since it is not currently available here. So a number of years ago, we started, we kind of got that idea out there and we started a website and we had a survey and there was a lot of interest in it. And then we started getting asked to give talks. And I've kind of been giving talks ever since about green burial. So even just last night, I was at a library and had a talk with maybe about 30 people. And it's just informational, like this is what green burial is, this is what we're trying to do. And it's always very engaging. There's people there and the questions go back and forth and people really want to hear about this. There is a lot of desire to learn more. It's kind of, for being about cemeteries and end of life, it's something that people are actually really excited to talk about. So,
Absolutely. And let me ask you this question, Peter, because, obviously now your community, if they weren't aware of your presence prior, they certainly are now. So what has the local community's response been to the actual court ruling? And have you received some positive feedback from residents concerning, support for your project?
Yeah, so general community, like broader Michigan community, we've got quite a bit of media attention recently, and I would say it has all been quite positive. So that's very encouraging. And then we do have some local supporters. So within that township, there are people who want to be buried in that site, and they have kind of been supporters from the beginning. But the direct neighbors really don't want a cemetery moving in next door. So there's a mix of people who want us and who don't.
Right. No, I understand. And concerning that wait list, I mean, so essentially you've got people who I'm sure are interested in purchasing or being part of that. So are you currently still taking names for your wait list and in anticipation of, the big day of actually opening?
Yeah. So we can't actually take any money and sell any plots because we don't have any to sell. But we do
Right.
have this thing called the wait list. And really, that's a way for us to gauge interest in a more direct manner. And so people who know that they want this and would want to be buried there and kind of want to be the first to be notified can put themselves on the wait list. And yeah, that just continues to grow. So there's quite a lot of people now who have indicated to us that they are ready to buy a plot when we are ready to sell one. So uh, yeah, it just kind of in the background, that's encouraging too, to see those names keep coming in.
Right, absolutely. So I know that there's probably a few things some of the viewers might want to know, especially would-be cemeterians. Now, when I give advice to people when they contact me about what should they look for, of course, I always tell them to start in the zoning office, exactly what you did, and that's the most sound advice you can give them. Unfortunately, sometimes, as you found out, and even myself, in different projects, that what's told to you or what's permissible, sometimes they try to change. So, I mean, out of curiosity for the viewers and myself, and I probably know what the answer is, but what sparked the Brooks Township to create this cemetery ban initially? Like, what was the crux of the situation? How did that arise?
Yeah, I mean, so the official reason, and it's what allowed them to do the police power ordinance, was for the health, safety, and welfare of property owners and residents and even visitors to the township. So there was some sort of public health concern that, yeah, I guess they were concerned about. And so a lot of that has kind of centered around water issues and fears of essentially polluting wells that are nearby. And we are not too far from a river, the Muskegon River. I mean, we're more than 1,000 feet away from it, and we're uphill ways. So it's really not that far. And it's kind of interesting because around this time of year, salmon start swimming up that river, and they're like 2 feet long or more. So they're big fish, and after they spawn, they all die in the river, and they just rot directly in the water. So I'm not so sure what the worry is about some low density burials taking place in the earth, like 1,000 feet away. But yeah, it's kind of officially centered around water.
Okay, and that's what I've seen over my years of advocacy is that typically it's the not in my backyard syndrome, and it seems like the water issue arises more often than not. Certainly, people on this podcast know that things like embalming fluid and concrete vaults and all that certainly add much more danger to the water system than any uh,
Yeah.
any being or animal that would basically decompose in the woods. So I mean, that's unfortunately that's something we've heard far too often. But I really believe that with the publicity you've received and with the judge's decision here, I'm hoping that a lot of these towns, municipalities, cities take note and realize that this is a violation of constitutional rights.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. So, I mean, if I were to ask you, even though you've had a lot of trials and travails, certainly I'm sure you're passionate, but I'm sure that it gets tiresome because of what you're going through. What would you say your greatest success so far in this journey of creating West Michigan burial forests would be?
I would say it would have to do with getting the word out and letting people know that this is an option. Because we do collect comments from people who sign up as well, and just from the talks that I give and talking to people. Many people are not aware that burial could be so simple, that they could have a burial in nature, that they could be buried in a forest or in a prairie. And once they understand that that's possible, and that at least at the higher levels, at the state levels, there's no rules against that, it makes a lot of intuitive sense to them. And they're like, this is beautiful. This is exactly what I want. And this is in alignment with all my values. So, like, I want that and I'm excited about it. Yeah. And so just kind of seeing the support and seeing that this is really something that people want and that they don't have nearby access to, that's encouraging and motivating.
Absolutely. And I know, again, you've still got some hard work ahead of you. I'm sure that, like you had mentioned, there's probably will be appeals and all types of little roadblocks that'll come in front of you, before you can actually get open and operating. But uh, I mean, out of curiosity, what are the next steps now? Is it sit back and wait, or do you have to wait for that decision from the judge for them to move forward, or where do you think you lie with that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I think technically we could say like that was overruled. The current ordinances don't stand, so we could try to proceed with the special use permit. But what we're doing is just kind of waiting to see, to really let it play out, because then there's going to be an appeal and it'll go to another court, and we'll see how long that takes. So we would like that sort of dust to settle first before we move forward again. But I mean, for IJ's sake, the Institute for Justice, if it does go into higher courts and if they do keep winning, kind of that advances their mission even further, because it can make a bigger and bigger impact. So it's slow, and it is unfortunate for the people who are older and or perhaps don't have as long of a time horizon on our list. And there have been a couple people who over the past couple years have had to find other options, which is really sad. But yeah, it'll take a while, and it's kind of all, I think, ultimately good and in the right direction.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I mean, if you had to say what the greatest lesson you've learned about green burial and the movement in your long battle fighting for it, I mean, what do you think needs to be done to remove these barriers and prevent occurrences, like the ones that you're facing?
Yeah. I mean, this isn't really answering that question, but what would have been helpful, and since then I have looked at other properties and talked to some other property owners and things, and there is such a thing as cemeteries being allowed by right in certain zones. And so I would say that's the first thing to look for. Look for a place that has where you're allowed to do this and you wouldn't actually have to fight for this. So if there's a special use permit option, you would have to have a very favorable township, and that wouldn't always be the case. Um, what was the question ultimately? What have I learned?
Well, no, I mean, I think you answered it partly there. What could be done to remove these barriers? I think you
Yeah,
answered it without realizing it, and I agree with you. I think that for would-be cemeterians, people who want to do this, they really have to do their homework. Some of the missteps lie in the fact that people take too much for granted when they go into a county office, and they think that these people know everything, and they take their word as the gospel truth, when unfortunately you have to dive a little deeper and you have to really be sure. And even then, when you do, like you just mentioned, it doesn't always turn out that way. Like a special use permit certainly can muddy the water a little bit, of course. Whereas if it was in a zone it was an absolutely, no matter what, you could have it. But, for instance, like in the state of Minnesota with the green burial moratorium,
yeah,
that wasn't even the same case. It
yeah,
was a legally permitted use that they decided they didn't like it. So, no, I think people will learn from what you've been through, and you're still going through it. But I think it's making us more educated as to what to look for and what help to seek. And And, if you continue to educate like you've been doing, you are helping people understand that not only is this safe, but it occurs every day since the dawn of time all around us, and the world is better for it. It's certainly
Yeah.
not hurting the world.
Yeah.
So,
In my talks, I like to give a historical perspective, and I typically start like 120 or 78,000 years ago. So it's like green burial has been going on for a very long time.
absolutely. And it occurs, like we said, even in the natural living world. They
Yep.
may not be buried, but they are decomposing and going back to nature as they should. So, I mean, we really appreciate you coming on today, because I know a lot of people have been looking at your case. They're really excited about your win. We all support you. We want to know that if there's anything we can do as an organization, but even as a movement and as people who support you, let us know, let our viewers know. We're behind you all the way. We know you're going to be open at some point, and the decisions that will be made in the near future on your behalf are going to change the way people look at this, and they're going to really stop what I would say. And I'm not accusing Brooks Township, but I'm saying that a lot of these governmental agencies believe that they can overpower or bully people, and that's just not the case. We have to stand up for our rights. So I guess I would finish the interview really with probably a very uplifting question. I mean, so Peter, what do you and Annica look forward to most when West Michigan Burial Forest actually opens?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to a community green space that is protected and is a place where people can really be deeply connected in a very literal way to nature. And so kind of that connection to nature, that opportunity to connect with nature, build that relationship, and actually have loved ones there, or potentially it would be you being there. That's a strong emotional connection. And there's also this connection of being able to care for that place, and just being able to enjoy the beauty of it and the serenity of it. And that all, I think, is very important for our relationship with the world and sustainability and the long-term future of all of us moving forward together. So that's kind of the aspect that I am most excited about.
Absolutely. That's a lovely vision. Thanks for sharing that, Peter. And so if our viewers would like to learn a little more, or if they could lend support to you, I don't know if that's even necessary, but if you want to, feel free to let people know how to learn more about the burial forest, please do. And thanks again for coming on to the podcast, Peter. We really appreciate it. So how can they find you?
Yeah, they can find us at miburial.com. And there's ways to email us through that. You can, reach out, and I will get back to you at some point. So yeah, happy to talk to anyone really who is interested in this or wants to be a part of this. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Peter, again. Thanks from the Global Green Burial Alliance. And we'll follow your case, and we know that you'll be victorious. And till the next time, Ed
Yeah.
Bixby, Global Green Burial Alliance. Thank you, everybody.